Mr. President, I'm happy that when morning business comes to an end, we will resume consideration of the FY 2010 Interior Appropriations Bill. I come to the floor today to support the significant increase in funding for water infrastructure included in that legislation. We in Maryland have just witnessed one more dramatic reminder that the water infrastructure of this country is in dire straits, in desperate need of new attention and greater investment. This past Friday afternoon, water surged for hours from a broken 6-foot-wide water main in Dundalk, Maryland. The raging water, as you can see here, covered streets, pouring water into the basements of many homes in Baltimore County, causing significant property damage. The raging water was washed out main roads in the area, causing significant damage to the infrastructure of the community. Here you can see the road being washed out by the water that flowed through this community. Mr. President, this past Friday I was in Dundalk earlier in the day for a groundbreaking of a new housing development. This is a proud historic community in Baltimore County, and I can tell you it was devastating, the damage that was done to this community as a result of infrastructure that failed. I would like to say this is an isolated episode, but unfortunately this is not the first time in the past year that we have witnessed incidents like this. Last December, a water main broke, sent a 4-foot wall of water down a busy commuter road in Bethesda, Maryland, just outside of Washington, D.C. Here you see the headlines from the paper where rescue workers were trying to rescue stranded drivers. This was River Road that turned into a river as a result of another water main break in Maryland. The water flowed with such force that the Maryland State emergency workers had to rescue some drivers by boat and even by helicopter. Here you see a dramatic rescue. Fortunately, no one was injured, but could have seen a loss of life. We need to deal with our infrastructure, with our pipes in our nation. With these incidents that were perhaps some of the most dramatic, there have been hundreds of water main breaks, large and small, across Maryland over the last year alone. And we're likely to see more instances like this in the future. According to the Environmental Protection Agency 2004 Clean Watershed Needs Survey, Maryland has nearly $6 billion in wastewater infrastructure needs alone. But Maryland is not unique in facing a crisis when it comes to water infrastructure. These episodes have been repeated throughout our nation. Our water infrastructure is reaching a tipping point in many places, having long outlived its 50-year lifespan. The American Society of Civil Engineers graded both wastewater and drinking water systems a D-, the lowest rating of any infrastructure category. These problems are compounded by the growing population and more frequent cycles of floods and droughts affecting communities across the country. The Environmental Protection Agency estimates an additional $6 billion per year will be needed to meet the nation's wastewater infrastructure needs, and $5 billion a year will be needed for drinking water needs. Mr. President, this is a matter of public safety, protecting the safety of the people of our community. This is an issue of preventing property damage to people in our community, and we're not sure that many don't have insurance to cover it because they didn't think they lived in a flood-prone area. They didn't expect a water main to cause a flood in their homes. We needed to save water. We're wasting a lot of water. And we needed to save energy because we transport our water in a very inefficient energy way. The Interior Appropriation Bill, which we will be considering today, makes a significant investment in our nation's water infrastructure. It contains $2.1 billion for improvements to the wastewater infrastructure through the Clean Water State Revolving Fund. This amounts to $1.4 billion more than Congress appropriated in the last fiscal year. The bill also contains almost $1.4 billion for the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund. This is almost $600 million more than Congress appropriated last year. These funding levels come on top of the $6 billion for water infrastructure that's going to states as part of the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act. Much of this new commitment is thanks to the new administration that has recognized the infrastructure crisis and is doing something about it. That commitment is echoed by my colleagues, Senator Feinstein and Alexander, who have included these investments in the bill we will be considering today. I thank them for their commitment. But new investment alone is not enough. That is why I've introduced, along with Senator Boxer, Inhofe, and Crapo, S. 1005, the Water Infrastructure Financing Act of 2009. This is a bipartisan effort, as it should be, to improve America's infrastructure. The Water Infrastructure Financing Act of 2009 truly represents a watershed moment in the legislative history of the Clean Water Act and the Safe Drinking Water Act. First and foremost, the bill makes it possible for us to continue considerable investment in the nation's aging infrastructure by significantly increasing the authorizations for clean water and drinking water. The bill provides $20 billion for the Clean Water State Revolving Fund and nearly $15 billion for the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund over the next 5 years. But the bill goes further to develop new tools to address some of our pressing and growing water infrastructure needs. It allows new and important types of projects to qualify for funding, including efforts to secure our wastewater and drinking water facilities and green infrastructure that is often more effective and less expensive than traditional infrastructure. The bill provides additional flexibility in the Clean Water State Revolving Fund to help poor communities, providing loan forgiveness and improving financing, an ability that is especially important as budget cuts make critical infrastructure investment beyond the reach of many communities. The legislation creates nearly $2 billion in grant programs to make infrastructure upgrades that will reduce the number of combined and sanitary sewage overflows. These overflows are estimated to contribute 850 billion gallons of untreated sewage and stormwater to the nation's waterways every year. There's a new $60 million per year nationwide grant program to provide funding to states and municipalities to reduce lead in drinking water, to protect our children. The bill also contains a new $50 million nationwide grant program to address water quality issues associated with agriculture. The bill gives new incentives for water utilities to plan for the future so that we don't face another crisis of failing infrastructure 20, 50, or 75 years down the road. Mr. President, this legislation has the support of broad constituencies. The utility construction contractors, engineers and manufacturers, labor organizations, environmental groups, the clean water agencies, regulators, academics, and local government. The bill was reported out of the Environment and Public Works Committee by a voice vote, strong bipartisan vote. Americans have the right to clean water flowing through their streams, rivers, and bays. We have the right to drinking water that is healthy. Mr. President, while I proudly support H.R. 2996, the Department of Interior Appropriation Act of 2010, I am hopeful that the full Senate will have the opportunity to vote on the Water Infrastructure Financing Act of 2009 this year. If so, we will be keeping faith with the American people by providing the tools necessary to meet with their basic human health and environmental needs. And we will help provide water systems that can keep water running through the pipes rather than the streets that we saw in Dundalk, Maryland this past weekend. I thank the President for the attention, and I would yield the floor.